Welcome everyone to my channel. Now it's time for a short dark story. Dark stories for my graphic dark art. The first story is called Between Silence and Signals. This will be part of a series of tales devoted to detective and thriller narratives with a mystical edge. Most events will unfold during the war in Ukraine and the city of Odesa, but the settings, locations, and timelines may shift depending on the atmosphere and the mood of the stories. My first story is titled Between Silence and Signals. Please don't forget, if you enjoy my idea and my art, subscribe to this channel, follow me on YouTube, Patreon, and Instagram, hit the like button, and turn on the notification bell. Enjoy listening and watching.
Between silence and signals. Sometimes a human is like a broken antenna. The lines that were meant to transmit light spark, tangle, and collapse into chaotic webs. Inside them lies everything. Childhood memories, the smell of burning, voices echoing from the depth of night. He stands stretched out, as if wings hold him on the edge. But these are not angels' wings. They are frames stretched over silence, where every movement cracks and shatters the air. Peace off, peace on. A switch we never controlled, the voice inside repeats. Peace turned off, peace turned on, but never in our hands. His body is a map of war. Lines burn, cut into flesh, pulling him both to the ground and to the sky. Sparks run between them, unnoticed until they ignite into flame. The word Bichki is carved at the side. More than letters, it's an incantation. They burn, and with them people burn too. He remains still. Only his eyes search beyond the chaos. For someone who can read these lines as they are. Not a drawing, not a scheme, but a living wound that pulses. And within all of this, a strange pause. Between silence and signals. Between light and burning. Between a man and what was once called an angel.
Any line is never just a mark. It is a memory of a movement that has already taken place. We ourselves are endless carriers of other people's traces and of our own shadows. Sometimes a drawing only reflects what we are too afraid to admit in reality. He did not realize at once that the noise rising in his head was not his own thoughts. It was the sea. The surf pounded against the sand, heavy and booming, like the breath of a giant. Sviatoslav came to himself as if surfacing from the depths of evening. The gray light was already dissolving the outlines of things, and the beach looked like an old photograph where faces could not be discerned. In the distance, the harbor lights flickered. Red and yellow, they seemed like faraway stars that had fallen to the ground. Sviatoslav shuddered. It was not the first time he had felt this. A dull blow, impossible to mistake for a firecracker or a slammed door. A missile. It had exploded somewhere beyond the horizon, and the sound had rolled all the way here, onto the empty shore. In the ruins of a nearby abandoned boathouse, a window pane cracked, trembling under the pressure of the blast wave. He sat beneath an acacia, small, slender, yet dense with leaves. The tree grew out of the sand, its roots protruding like thin tentacles. Sviatoslav always chose this spot to hide from the sun. By day, it had been lively here, children shouting, people laughing. Now the beach had emptied. Only the sound of the sea and sleeping gulls remained. And then Sviatoslav saw it. On the dark slope, closer to the water's edge, something was moving. Not a person, not a dog. Too strange, too broken in its motions. At first it was nothing but part of the darkness, but gradually the shadow began to peel away, as if tearing itself from the sand and coming alive, darker than the surrounding night. Sviatoslav froze. His eyes strained to catch the shape, but the evening haze and wind only blurred it further. The blot quivered again. And then he understood. Before him stood the outline of a woman, and beside her a massive figure. Suddenly something glinted in the dark, at first like the shimmer of water, but then unmistakable. A knife. Metal sliced through air and flesh. For a moment the stars revealed the crimson gleam of blood, and with it a muffled, stifled cry of the woman, like the moan of wind in the ruins of the old boathouse. The leaves of the acacia rustled violently behind him, as though the tree had shuddered too. Sviatoslav turned, but when he looked back toward the shore, there was only emptiness. No figures, no blood, only the sea and the night. Cold pierced his legs. He lowered his gaze and, horrified, saw footprints in the sand, leading from where he sat straight to the place where the murder had just unfolded. When the lights went out, the night collapsed into complete darkness. The explosion knocked out the electricity, and the entire neighborhood was plunged into pitch-black silence. Only the sea roared, and in the distance, one after another, the hoarse sounds of generators sputtered to life. Sviatoslav switched on his phone's flashlight. Only 5% remained. There was no moon. The stars gave too little light, so he hurried home, illuminating his path with the weak beam. It was already curfew time, and there wasn't a soul around. Sviatoslav feared running into a patrol, but he was lucky and made it safely back to his apartment. At home, he quickly took a shower, grabbed a bite to eat, and still trembling with tension, fell into sleep. The morning began as usual, with scrolling through telegram channels. The news was much the same: destroyed buildings, severed power lines, casualties. But one report caught his attention. On the seashore, in a small settlement, a rocket fragment had hit a residential house. In the ruins they found the body. Strangely, it was a woman, with stab wounds that, as the doctors said, had been the cause of her death. Her husband, however, was never found. Relatives insisted the couple should have been together. At first, Sviatoslav scrolled past it, just like dozens of other reports, but something in his mind locked. A strange coincidence with what he had seen the night before. Over breakfast and a cup of strong coffee, he decided to return to work. He sat down at his tablet. His hand moved on its own, almost without control, surrendering to inner intuition. Lines and strokes fell freely, impressionistically, and suddenly the drawing revealed something that even surprised him.
A symbol on the edge. Sometimes signs appear where you least expect them. Lines and words emerge from emptiness, and it is impossible to know, are they coincidence or a call seeking a witness? Sviatoslav caught himself drifting again. His drawing turned into an abstract pattern where a strange word emerged, bichki. It looked like a coincidence, yet far too insistent. And when he scrolled through the news, another detail caught his eye. The buildings of the famous Prevost market in Odesa had been damaged. The market his neighbors always gossiped about. They sold everything there, from cheap vegetables to seafood, and rumors about the fire and destruction were already spreading through the city. By noon, Sviatoslav decided to go there himself. He took the number 5 tram, which moved slowly as if through thickened time. The carriage smelled of dampness and metal, while outside stretched gray blocks, shattered houses, empty eyes of windows. It felt as if the whole city lived in 2 layers, one real, the other as if drawn by his own hand. At the market, everything seemed almost calm. The fire had long been extinguished, debris swept aside, the traces of ruin hidden beneath new layers of noisy trade. Yet people whispered. They said that among the ruins after today's shelling, in one of the destroyed houses, a woman had been found. But she had not died from the explosion. Her body bore knife wounds. Sviatoslav, as if by accident, stopped near those who were speaking, nodding, catching fragments of their words. These conversations did not sound like gossip, but like incantations, as though the market itself guarded a secret.
At one stall, his gaze lingered. An old man, eyes narrowed, dry and wrinkled, was selling freshly caught gobies. The fish lay on ice, glassy-eyed, with a frozen emptiness. The man looked at Sviatoslav and whispered almost inaudibly, "Do you want fresh goby? Only today. Only for you. I have not only something to sell, I have something to tell you."
Continuation. Lines, like nets intertwined through time, sometimes become a warning. They speak not only of what has been, but of what will come again. And when they resurface, we become witnesses of the past returning, as though it had never truly been closed. Sviatoslav listened to the old man at the stall, and the longer he spoke, the louder those invisible knots creaked inside his head. "You know, this isn't the first murder," the man said quietly, staring directly into his eyes. "Women with knife wounds were found back when I was a boy, and even before that. The old men whispered about it. These crimes appear like shadows across the decades, almost with the same scenarios." Sviatoslav felt a cold shiver run down his spine. His drawings, there too the lines folded into a repeating sign, into an abstract net, like fishing gear. "You're probably surprised I know all this," the man went on with a faint smirk. "You think because I sell fish I understand nothing beyond salt and scales? But I know you, Sviatoslav, at least from afar." He straightened, his eyes narrowing as if to read his reaction. "My name is Alexander Vlaschenko." The surname struck memory. Sviatoslav immediately recalled where he had heard it. A whole dynasty of artists, the Vlaschenkos, who had left dozens of paintings in museums and private collections in Odessa and beyond. And now one of their descendants stood before him, with the rough hands of a fisherman, with a voice filled with sand and salt. "Yes," said Vlaschenko, as if guessing his thoughts. "I am a son, a grandson, a great-grandson, but time spares no one. Some paint canvases for patrons, and some, well, sell gobies. The Lord's ways are unfathomable." Sviatoslav remained silent. "I saw your works at an exhibition," Vlaschenko added. "People spoke of them. They said your drawings seemed as if they came from another world, that they carried strange subjects, like nets pulling fish from the sea. Only it wasn't fish. It was something else." The words pierced like hooks. Sviatoslav felt the market fall silent. Voices dissolving, leaving only the two of them. The fisherman with the eyes of a witness to the past, and himself, an artist whose drawings had suddenly become a key to something greater. "That is why I want to tell you something," Vlaschenko said, leaning closer. "What I know was passed down from my ancestors," Vlaschenko began, gazing somewhere through Sviatoslav. "One of my great-grandfathers even left a drawing. It showed a man with skin burned by the sun, salt on his lips and in his hair, eyes green as the sea, teeth shining bright as sunlight. His name was Ivan Kutsar. Everyone in Odessa knew him. In Moldovanka, at Privoz, he was a smuggler, bringing goods from Turkey and beyond.
An honest bandit, they called him. People respected him because he never lied, and his word weighed more than gold. And he had a love, a woman he worshipped. But where there is envy, there are enemies. When Ivan went to sea to complete another deal, other men, jealous and spiteful, began to whisper lies. They claimed his woman was walking with another. It was false. Everyone knew. But Ivan was proud and jealous. He wanted to believe her, but he couldn't. When he returned from the sea and saw her on the shore, the poison of rumors had already consumed him. And right there, beside his boat, he stabbed her with a knife. Blood seeped into the sand, into the waves. And he climbed back into the boat and sailed away. No one ever saw him again. The story shook the entire city. They spoke of it at the markets, in the port, in Moldavanka's narrow alleys. But soon the First World War erupted, and the roar of blood drowned the noise of the old tragedy. Yet, from then on, people began to see strange things. Every time Odessa was shaken by great blows, shellings, fires, mass deaths, someone saw them. Sometimes the girl in her blood-soaked dress, sometimes Ivan himself with his flashing knife, sometimes both together, standing by the boat, as if time had frozen. Then came the Second World War, and the visions returned. Even when the fascists hanged people in the city, the corpses swaying in the wind under the cold winter moon, people said that among those shadows they saw the shadow of the smuggler Kutsar, with his bloodied knife, and sometimes the boat, where he sat with his Angelina. And now whispers spread again through the city that the couple has begun to appear once more. No one could understand. Were they people or shadows? Or perhaps even something darker, more terrifying than shadows themselves?
Tragedies draw in dark times, and dark times only multiply tragedies. They said that great bursts of energy, wars, revolutions, bombardments, awaken what never disappears. Perhaps they were shadows of the past, perhaps magnetic storms, or perhaps something else we are not meant to know but forced to live with. Vlaschenko fell silent, as if listening to the noise of invisible waves. The siren wailed, followed almost instantly by a booming impact. A ballistic missile. Flight time from Crimea, less than 2 minutes. People around seemed to realize this all at once, some dropping to the ground, covering their heads with their hands, an instinct that, of course, could save no one, but instincts take over. Sviatoslav was knocked off his feet. His ears were ringing. In his chest it felt as if something cracked, a sharp ringing in his ears. For a second, it seemed that the world shuddered and went dark. But when he lifted his head, the market was still standing. The strong blast wave stunned him and shattered the structures of the old windows around the corner of the market building. Debris and plaster stuck to the stalls with still twitching fish, crabs, and people who began to raise their heads in bewilderment. Were they alive, and were all their limbs still in place? Behind the goby stall, there was no one. Fish lay scattered on the stone floor, glassy eyes staring straight at him, mouths opening and closing in silent gasps, gills twitching. Death was close, and Vlaschenko was gone. Sviatoslav leapt up, forcing his way through the crowd. People screamed, called for children, cursed, prayed. He pushed toward the exit, but 2 men in uniform blocked his path. Policemen, their faces wary and faintly cruel. "Where are you rushing?" one asked. "What were you doing here?" Sviatoslav began, but his words tangled in the noise of the alarm.
His strained and exhausted look did not please them, and the heavy bag on his shoulder, out of place. He was taken out of the market without being listened to, and within a few minutes, he was already in a stifling room with peeling walls, a radio receiver broadcasting news from the front. In the waiting room of the police station sat several policemen, one around 50, the other very young, fresh out of training, a lad with a strange squint and a skewed left eye. On the bench opposite, half sitting, snoring and drooling, slept dead drunk a man without legs and part of his right arm, dressed in the worn and dirty uniform of the military uniform of a Ukrainian soldier. One of his prosthetics, covered with stickers of patches from various Ukrainian combat brigades, lay in the opposite corner, part of its foot fallen into a bowl from which the police dog was devouring. Nobody was paying attention to the inclusive veteran. On the table they dumped Sviatoslav's belongings, a notebook filled with drawings, a stack of pages covered in incomprehensible grids of lines, a diary. They leafed through them in silence, but the further they read, the heavier the silence became. "What are these scribbles?" one policeman asked. "Prophecies?" Sviatoslav tried to explain that it was art, but suspicion lingered in their eyes. In such times, art and madness were rarely distinguished. "We need to deal with him," said another curtly, pulling from the pile a transparent bag containing some kind of dried grass. "Ah, so you're selling and spreading drugs, and in such a difficult time for the country?" said the older policeman, squinting as he looked at the officers who had brought Sviatoslav in. "Throw him in the cage until the circumstances are clarified," he ordered, and soon Sviatoslav was in a cell. The air reeked of sweat, cheap liquor, and dampness. On the bunks sat figures more like shadows than people, gypsies, drifters, drunkards. One stared blankly into the corner. Another muttered a prayer that sounded more like a curse. In the dimness, the cell felt less like a place for humans and more like a corridor between worlds. And as Sviatoslav sat clutching his empty backpack to his knees, he suddenly thought, the peeling paint and cracks on the walls repeated his own drawings. A web of lines converged and spread, as if the prison itself was breathing his fear. Someone nearby gave a rasping laugh. "You've seen them too, haven't you?" a voice asked from the darkness. Sviatoslav turned his head, but in the half-light, there was no face, only a glint of eyes, green as the sea. In the dim half-light of the cell, Sviatoslav barely realized that the voice belonged to an old gypsy. His face resembled dried skin, scorched by smoke and time. One eye was cloudy, amber, almost glass-like, but it glowed with the reflection of the lamp hanging high on the ceiling, like a coal from a campfire. From his mouth jutted a few remaining teeth, and his yellow, nicotine-stained fingers held a long hand-rolled cigarette, puffing while his neck and head twitched, as if he might collapse at any moment into an epileptic seizure. He smirked, showing a broken grin, and spoke.
"Since you see these lines, it means they have chosen you. I saw them too, as a child, and all my life after. Smoke stretched toward the ceiling, curling into strange shapes." The gypsy continued, "When I was a child, the camp often stood not in
The city, but out in the fields. The old ones would sit by the fire and tell stories about smugglers, about borders, about the darkness that always wanders near.
They would take charred sticks and draw signs right on the ground, circles and lines, to protect themselves from evil spirits and from the darkness that is always close when the source of light is fading. These symbols were our nets, not for catching fish, but for catching shadows."
His words pierced the silence, for the other prisoners were already asleep on their bunks. Sviatoslav remembered the house where the woman had died. The gypsy suddenly spoke quieter, almost in a whisper. "Where they found her. Long ago, there was a camp there. And on the night the missile struck, we saw the shadows again. The same ones as decades ago." Suddenly, he began to laugh, and the laughter turned into a violent cough, as though the old gypsy might suffocate. Sviatoslav wanted to ask what he meant, But at that moment, the cell door banged open, a dull crash of metal against the wall. An older policeman entered, waving his hand. "A few bodies, out you go, air."
Several men got up, shuffling their feet. Among them was Sviatoslav. The gypsy remained sitting, motionless, only slowly releasing a ring of smoke as he recovered from coughing, his strange eye gleaming. Their gazes met, and Sviatoslav felt as if the old man still wanted to say something, but the door slammed shut. At the exit, the policeman handed him his backpack with a crooked smirk. "The bosses said not to waste time on small fry. There's enough work as it is. Don't get caught again." Suddenly, the sharp, drawn-out wail of the air raid siren tore the air. Outside, the sky was already graying, the damp fog turning into a fine, cold rain, houses around dissolving into shadows, with hardly a person to be seen. From the sound of the sirens, stray dogs howled, scavenging in the trash containers near the market. Somewhere above, bursts of anti-air fire could be heard, intercepting reconnaissance drones. The policeman slammed the door behind him. Sviatoslav stepped aside, sat on a stair, and opened his backpack. Inside, crumpled sketches, broken pencils, torn sheets. His wallet was gone, his phone as well. For some reason, the whole backpack was filled with sunflower seed husks and cigarette butts, neither of which Sviatoslav ever touched.
A chill ran down his spine when another distant explosion rolled through the air and the dogs howled again. But he knew he had to get there, to the place where the missile had struck the night before, to where once the gypsy camp had stood, to where the woman had died. He rose and began thinking how to reach that place, through the alarms, through the night, through the city where the lines of past and present intertwined like nets. But trams were paid, and most likely already not running, since the latest drone strikes had destroyed the city's electric substation.
Rare street lamps lit the roads, the sounds of power generators breaking out from somewhere in the darkness, and here and there the trembling, dim light of shop windows that were closing. In the sky, air defense worked, flashes tearing apart the darkness. When they lit up the streets, it became clear. Dogs rummaged through garbage bins. Sometimes ambulance sirens could be heard, muffled, strained, as if they were complaining to the city itself. At the exit from the old district, Sviatoslav met a nameless soldier. He jumped toward him suddenly, eyes frightened, hands trembling. "Brother, how do I get to the station? Or maybe you know a cheap hostel. Can you give me money for food?" he asked. It began like a seemingly friendly conversation. The soldier spoke, choking on his words. "My name is Vladimir. You see, I was conscripted by force. I've been fighting for a year now. They beat me, broke 2 ribs, and 3 weeks later sent me to the front. In winter, I almost froze to death in a dugout. Twice I was badly concussed. After that, I began to see—" He stopped, staring into emptiness. "Began to see my friends in the trench at night, my dead ones." Sviatoslav was silent, listening. The soldier swallowed and continued. "I talked to them. Sometimes I even laughed. They came, sat down beside me. These quirks of mine, these conversations with emptiness, the commanders noticed. Treatment, no, not for them. They just need bodies in the trenches, in any form. And I just waited for the night." He inhaled the air as if it were smoke. "One of those nights, after shelling, Sasha came. He had died 2 weeks earlier. A drone tore him apart. There was almost no body left. But he came, and he said the commander was to blame." His eyes twitched. "The commander got drunk that day, didn't answer the radio, didn't send ammunition, didn't give reinforcements. There were 5 of us left. We were simply gunned down by drones and then finished off with mortars. Their torn bodies are still being found piece by piece by the guys holding those positions. I was in that dugout. I saw Sasha's brains. His voice broke
Into a whisper and a sob. That's why I left. Deserted. But I have a task. I must find that commander. And also, he held his breath, Sasha's girl, Angelina. He asked me to find her. And yesterday she suddenly came to me in a dream, stepping out of the shadows like Sasha once did. The soldier spoke quickly, without stopping, as if he feared that if he fell silent, they, the dead, would start speaking first. But then Sviatoslav spoke.
The neighbors said, Sviatoslav began cautiously, that with Angelina that night, there was a man. Many decided it was her husband, but his body was never found. Vladimir jerked his head sharply, his eyes flashing. No, it couldn't have been her husband. Her husband is Sasha. He was fighting on the war. I know this for sure. He looked a little away from Sviatoslav as if he saw someone else standing there. Vladimir paused as if struggling with himself, but still spoke. She has a brother, an older one. His name was Pyotr Zelensky. He is her brother, but they had different mothers. The father was the same. Before the war, he drank, dealt drugs and the stolen goods. He never had a job, only debts, taverns, friends from places not so far away. And he always pulled money out of Angelina. Before the war, she had her own small business. She sewed clothes very well. When the war came, she gave one business to the military, where they assembled drones, the other for weaving camouflage nets. She gave all her fabric for the nets and wove them herself, like a spider. Vladimir smiled faintly, saying this and looking away from Sviatoslav. Sviatoslav tensed. And what happened to him? He was mobilized, Vladimir said hoarsely. But at the front, he didn't last even half a year. He left on his own, deserted. Then he started being seen here, in Odesa, and I'm almost certain he made his way to Angelina. Vladimir looked at Sviatoslav as if he wanted to convey not only words, but the weight of memory itself. This man always kept her from living, and if there was a man next to her that night, most likely it was him. Sometimes it seems that the world is held together by invisible threads. They connect people and events, like a web where every knot is a meeting and every line is destiny. And if paths are meant to cross, they will find each other anyway, whether in darkness or in light. You know, said Sviatoslav, looking at the empty streets, I think the threads of the universe have joined our paths. Because I don't know exactly where Angelina lived. I don't know the precise house where the rocket struck. But it's good that I met you, and you met me. Now we can get there together. You know that place. They walked along the old quarters. Stone arches, rusted gates, facades with broken windows and crumbling stucco ornaments, all reminded them that the city preserved memory longer than the people themselves. Odessa has always lived on the edge of light and darkness, joy and grief, Sviatoslav said quietly. The First World War brought trains full of the wounded here. The Civil War, hunger and blood. Then the Revolution, chaos and destruction. Whites, reds, blacks, red and blacks, reds again, and now blue and yellows. During the Second World War, the streets filled with gallows and Nazi patrols, but underground in the catacombs, another life boiled, fighting for freedom. This city knows how to hide its secrets, and it always pays for them with the lives of its best people. Volodymyr listened in silence. The flashes of air defense tore apart the sky, illuminating for a moment the peeling walls of houses, and it seemed as if the very buildings whispered of bygone times. After a couple of turns, they reached the industrial zone. Tall warehouse buildings, overgrown tracks, black skeletons of cranes. The metal groaned in the wind. Somewhere a steel door slammed, the sound echoing in the emptiness. In the dark, a A silhouette flickered, whether a dog or a person, but when they came closer, the place was empty. They walked on, and each of their steps echoed as if the industrial zone itself was listening. It seemed that not only the winds and shadows of the past lived here, but also the sounds of war, which were drawing ever nearer. In one of the courtyards of a ruined factory, they stumbled upon a mobile anti-aircraft unit. Two men were furiously firing heavy machine guns, while two others sat at laptops connected to the targeting system. The battle raged. Between bursts of gunfire, coarse swearing could be heard in both Russian and Ukrainian. One soldier ran to the wall behind which Petro and Sviatoslav were hiding to relieve himself, and immediately returned to his position as the searchlights once again locked onto drones in the sky, and the fight resumed. "We need to go around here," Volodymyr said hoarsely. Sviatoslav hunched his shoulders, feeling the tension thicken around them, and realized ahead lay not only the road, but also what the city kept hidden, deeper than its ruins.
They came out of the industrial zone and moved further, deeper toward the city's outskirts. The houses became fewer, the streets wider and quieter. Empty blocks gradually turned into wild wastelands overgrown with weeds and bushes. Somewhere far away, almost invisible in the darkness, a dull rumble could be heard. The sea was beating against the shore like an ancient drum, setting the rhythm of the night. Ahead of them appeared a building. It stood at the edge of the street like a deserted island among the fog. Even in the half-light it was clear. The ruins were massive. It was not just a house, but an entire complex, a workshop of several buildings with half-collapsed walls and empty window openings. The road leading to the ruined building was blocked off with police tape warning of danger. Sviatoslav and Vladimir did not go directly in, but stopped at the entrance. Neither of them knew why they had come here, but something invisible, instinct, a thread, fate, had pulled them to this place, where perhaps besides death, destruction, and questions, they might find answers. They sat down on a collapsed slab, breathing heavily after the long walk. They stayed silent as if afraid to break the fragile stillness. At that moment, the sirens that had tormented the city all evening and part of the night finally fell silent and gave people and animals the chance to sleep, to sink into the muteness of silence. The alert was over. The fog was slowly dispersing, and the sky opened. Cold stars flickered above. Somewhere in the distance, the chirping of crickets could be heard. The world seemed to hold its breath, but it was precisely this silence that was the most disturbing. And then they heard it. At first, a faint rustle, as if the wind had stirred the rubble. Then, steady footsteps, rhythmic, heavy, but stealthy, as if someone was deliberately trying to walk quieter than they could, but unable to hide their presence. The sound was approaching, dissolving between the noise of the sea and the night's silence, but each step struck clearly as if hitting the nerves with short rushes. Someone was very close, practically behind part of the ruins next to which they were resting. Sviatoslav tensed, his eyes glinting in the darkness. Sviatoslav felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Someone was coming toward them out of the depths of the night.
They sat frozen on the slab as the footsteps drew closer and closer. And then, from behind the wall where they had been hiding, a dark head appeared. The silhouette slowly rose to its full height as if the air itself were pushing it out. A figure stepped into the half-light, tall, nearly 2 meters, broad-shouldered, heavy breathing, a smile, out of place, far too calm in the stillness. Vladimir leapt to his feet. His fingers trembled, but he struck the lighter with certainty. The flame flared up, and for a moment lit the face. "Sashka," he whispered, "Angelina's brother." In the same instant, Vladimir's hand shot to his belt, and a combat knife gleamed in the lighter's glow. The blade quivered, ready to plunge into the chest of the uninvited guest. But Sashka raised his hands, as though warding off not the knife, but his own shadow. "Wait," he rasped. "Don't rush. I'm sober. Completely. Haven't touched a drop in a long time." Sviatoslav sat stunned, shaking his head as if trying to rid himself of a spell. The wind carried the roar of the sea, and it seemed that every wave echoed Sashka's words. "I didn't desert the front out of fear," he went on. "Don't think that. I found out my woman was pregnant. I decided to leave. For good. To start over. Drop everything to hell and run. I wanted to go back to her. But then," his voice faltered, "I found out my sister was dead." He stepped closer. The lighter flickered out, and now only darkness separated them. The cops came to me, asking questions, looking for something, and I realized I had to dig for the truth myself, to find out who and why. And so here I am. I thought I'd find traces or people, and I found you. That means it's meant to be. Let's figure it out together." Vladimir did not lower the knife. His eyes, reflecting the stars, gleamed like those of a hunted animal, and Sviatoslav suddenly felt the cold thicken around them. Not from the wind, not from the night, but from the fact that 3 people had been bound together here by something greater than chance. He thought, maybe it's not us looking for answers. Maybe it's the darkness itself that seeks witnesses.
Sasha took a step back, keeping a safe distance between himself and Vladimir. His body froze in a half-turn, ready to bolt, if the knife trembling in Vladimir's hand suddenly lunged forward. "Let's all calm down," he said quickly, swallowing his words. "I'm not here for nothing. Shortly before her death, I often visited Angelina, helped her with her volunteer work. We even started to grow closer, a little. She knew I had been in the army, knew I left because my woman was pregnant, and she decided to support me. Gave me a chance to believe I could start everything over." Sviatoslav watched him, not fully believing, but Sasha went on, his voice firmer now. "Angelina was a smart, strong, beautiful woman. She loved her husband and wanted to help him not only here in the rear, but also there at the front. He called her, wrote to her, and complained about his commander, about how he led people badly, threw them under shelling, how he was strange." Sasha lowered his eyes, exhaling heavily. Angelina had connections. She spoke with other soldiers, many because of her work, and they said the same thing, that her husband's commander was either an agent or a spy. He sold positions, leaked coordinates for money, directed strikes at key points. Because of him, not only soldiers but civilians, whole districts were dying. Vladimir tightened his grip on the knife. In his eyes there was a flash of recognition and hatred. Sasha raised his hands higher, as if trying to shield himself with words from their distrust. "I knew this," he said quietly, "and the day before her death, she said that she had evidence, papers, that she had carried out her own little investigation, and that if something happened to her, those papers should be looked for in a certain place. She pointed out where." He took another step forward, his eyes glinting in the half-light. "That is the reason I'm here, why I'm searching, why I couldn't just walk away." The wind carried a rumble from the sea, as if to confirm his words. The darkness around them seemed to thicken, and for the first time, Sviatoslav felt what they were looking for might be far more terrifying than any truth they were ready to face.
Vladimir, clenching his teeth, held the knife ready for another moment, but then slowly lowered his hand and slid the blade back into its sheath. The steel disappeared into the darkness, as if reluctant to return to the shadows. Sviatoslav raised his hand in a gesture of greeting, breaking the heavy pause. "Well then," he said hoarsely, "let's get to work." The three of them moved forward. Sviatoslav walked first, lighting the way with a flashlight on his phone. The beam carved fragments from the darkness, broken furniture, charred beams, crumbling plaster. Every step echoed with the crunch of glass and a muffled thud, as though the house itself was breathing their presence. They climbed inside, through a shattered window that once led into the living quarters. Here, among the wreckage, the stench of burning mixed with dampness, and everything around seemed not just destroyed, but scorched down to the very memory of the walls. "Angelina said," Sasha began, his voice trembling, "she had a hiding place under the floor in her bedroom. They found the spot, guided by the remains of the layout. The three of them, choking on dust, pushed aside debris and cleared rubble until their hands touched metal. A safe. Their hearts pounded louder than the falling stones, but the joy was short-lived. The lock was broken, the lid twisted. "It's been opened," Vladimir whispered, his eyes flashing with fury. "Before the explosion," Sviatoslav added quietly, "which means the killer came earlier." Inside, ash, charred fragments of documents, nothing left but the ghost of paper. But Sasha dropped to his knees and pressed his ear to the floor, as if listening to the heartbeat of the house. He knocked with his knuckles. "There's more here." He struck harder. The metal gave a hollow reply. A second one. A secret compartment. Only Angelina had known about it. Sasha pulled out a key, small, smooth, its pattern worn down. The lock shuddered, then yielded. Inside was a small metal box, and within it, a flash drive. The three of them froze as if what they held was not a memory stick, but a relic. Sasha quickly took out his tablet, his fingers shaking. The screen flickered to life, and Angelina's face appeared. Her eyes were weary but clear, her voice firm, as though she knew she was speaking for the last time. "If you are seeing this, it probably means I am no longer alive, or I am forced into hiding." Her words cut off. At that moment, outside the window, a siren split the night sky, a long, tearing howl. Air raid alert. Silence shattered with the echo of war. Somewhere nearby, air defense thudded, and in the distance, an explosion rumbled. They sat in the ruins, holding the tablet. She was still saying something, but it was impossible to make out. And they felt how their world was collapsing again, this time from within.
The screen trembled with static. The roar of air defenses and the ragged thud of artillery drowned out Angelina's voice. Her words sank into the cacophony, dissolving into fragments, into rustling, into the very breath of war. But suddenly, the sirens went silent. A fragile, uncertain stillness descended upon the city, and the sound of her voice cut through the space like a knife. "His name is—" She spoke it, and the three men, holding their breath, exchanged quick glances. It sounded too familiar, too close. "He came to me when Sasha was at the front. He had come before. He always knew both of us." Angelina's eyes on the recording were moist, yet firm. She seemed to be looking straight into them. "We studied together in high school. Since then, he kept returning to my life, like a shadow, always intrusive, always alien. And now he came again, said he knew what I had uncovered about him, but that it meant nothing to him, because everything he did was for the sake of our shared, beautiful future." Her voice faltered, and she covered her face with her hand. Yet even then, he dropped to his knees and once more began to confess his love. He said he would do everything for me, that he had money, that he would take me abroad, that I should leave my husband, my volunteering, that the war was lost and people meant nothing. On the recording, her shoulders trembled as if struck. "But I know who he is. He is a traitor. He has killed people. He continues to kill. And what is terrifying is that it all goes unpunished. Perhaps someone above him stands behind him, covering his actions. It is like a bottomless, dark abyss. Look into it, and there is no end. Like a web that has ensnared the minds of people who are ready for anything in the name of profit and power. She raised her eyes, and tears glistened on her lashes. Vladimir clenched his fists so tightly his knuckles turned white. Sasha bit his lip until it bled. Sviatoslav felt his heart pounding directly in his temples. This man. And suddenly, a crash. The earth trembled. An explosion struck so close that the glass that had survived in the frames shattered into fragments. In an instant, everything was swallowed by darkness. Sviatoslav collapsed to the ground. A ringing burst in his ears, so strong it felt as though he were trapped inside a massive bell. The metal rang, hummed, vibrated, and his consciousness reeled on the edge. He felt the ringing expand, filling his skull, and then about to burst. And then came darkness. Deaf, all-consuming. A silence in which not even his own breath remained.
Sviatoslav began to feel, at first, only pain. Boundless, viscous, like molten iron inside his bones. He tried to open his eyes, but only one obeyed. The world was drowned in a whitish light, as if dawn was breaking through clouds of ash. Sounds broke through in fragments, distant sirens, shouts, a rumble woven into hollow silence. He tried to move, and realized he couldn't. His head was immobile, his body pinned down. His legs, he couldn't feel his legs. His eyes shifted to the side. Where there had been a wall just last night, there now yawned a hole into emptiness. The whole building seemed to have been turned inside out. And among the debris, Sasha. His figure, no, not a figure, a torn half of a body. The other part lost in the mass of brick and concrete. Sviatoslav wanted to scream, but only blood filled his throat. His gaze slid further, toward the place where Vladimir had been standing just moments before. But there was only a dark blot, smeared across the stones. Pain slashed his mind, shredded his breath. And then he heard footsteps. Someone was running. Voices. "Hold him! He's here! He's alive! He's breathing!"
Between silence and signals. Sometimes angels come not to save, but to remind us of the price of the path. Shadows are only the continuation of fate's lines, drawn too deeply into the memory of history. And when the signals fade, only a whisper remains, that every encounter is woven into the fabric of eternity.
Sviatoslav regained consciousness. At first, pain, boundless, sticky, like fire frozen inside his bones. Yet at the same time, his body seemed to have disappeared.
He couldn't feel it. How could this be explained? These words spun first in his mind. He tried to open his eyes. One barely opened. The world was flooded with a pale, milky light, as if dawn was breaking through a fabric of ash. Yet still he couldn't understand. Were his eyes open or not? What was happening to him? Darkness pressed in, thick and viscous. He breathed. Each breath came with agonizing effort, as though his ribs were breaking him from within. His body didn't respond. Only his head recorded, "I am alive." Sounds, at first distant, as if from another world. Voices, somewhere footsteps, somewhere the hum of life. Someone whispering, someone crying, someone laughing. And closer, rhythm, tick, tick, tick. Dry, even beeping. A monitor, a heartbeat. Everything that had happened in the last 24 hours rushed through his head. Ivan Kutsar, with salt on his lips and sea-colored eyes. Volodymyr, Sasha, their deaths, the fallen soldiers. And Angelina, her face, her lips moving, though he could not make out the words. And then a voice, otherworldly, cold, yet far too distinct to be a dream. A voice not outside, but as if inside his skull. Sviatoslav, I know everything about you. You're not a bad artist. And by the way, I am a collector. I even own several of your works. I was surprised when I learned you took an interest in this matter, and even more when I found you in that ruined building. The voice chuckled. As you know, rockets don't just fall randomly. They go where they're meant to go. If something remains standing, it must be destroyed. That's why there were 2 strikes. Now, only a wasteland, a massive crater. The whisper grew softer, but the words pierced into his mind like needles.
It's astonishing you survived, but it won't last. And you won't tell anyone. Everything that was there is buried. Everything is emptiness again, emptiness. And Sviatoslav sank back into darkness. The voice lashed out of the void, like a knife across raw nerves. Again, the sounds of the hospital. You won't tell anyone, anyway, it said calmly, almost wearily. I loved that woman, Angelina. She became a whore, a filthy creature. I loved her long ago, but she betrayed me, married that loser and refused to know me. And then she began digging under me. That I could not forgive. I laid the world at her feet, and she chose another. There was no anger in the voice, only cold certainty. No one was supposed to know what she found out. No one, except me and those who work with me. That's why I came to her. I knew she was home. I knew her habits. She was in the bedroom. I heard the water running. I had a knife, huge, military. I drove almost a full day in my pickup from the front lines, just for this, for her, for the destruction. I stabbed her so many times in the back that my arms were drenched in blood up to the elbows. I knew about the hiding place. I knew everything. She was smart, but not smart enough. We have people everywhere. Now she's gone. Now no one will ever know. The war will cover it. The war will write it all off. It goes on, and the deaths will go on. The darkness is still strong, and we will profit greatly. We are the masters of lives like yours, Sviatoslav. He seemed to smirk. By the way, you have good works, Sviatoslav. I was surprised to remember you are in my collection, and even more surprised to see you there in that house, at a place no one should have been. Artists, they say you feel the vibrations of the fabric of the universe, subtle, nearly invisible. Looks like it's true. And whatever you were doing there with that human trash, now you will become trash too. Pause. Silence, broken only by the pounding of his heart. Goodbye, Sviatoslav. After your death, your works will be worth more. Give my regards to Volodymyr, to Alexander, and to Angelina. And suddenly, a piercing whisper. A woman's voice, thin, trembling, as if from the other shore, speaking only inside Sviatoslav's head. Sviatoslav, it's me. I'm alive, alive, alive. He killed my friend who had come to stay for a while. Hold on, I'm coming to help. The sound stretched, broke, and turned into a continuous, ear-splitting ringing of a monitor, of heartbeat. Then, darkness.
Thank you very much for listening to this short story, Between Silence and Signals, illustrated with my graphic works. This project is just the beginning of a larger series of dark stories where drawing, memory, and mystery come together. If you would like to see more of my graphic works, as well as read short reflections and fragments of upcoming stories, you can always find them on my Patreon and Instagram. Your support helps me to continue creating new drawings, new stories, and to share them with you. Please subscribe, leave your comments, and stay with me on this journey. Thank you all, and see you in the next story.